Hey, welcome in, everybody. Week 11 is underway in the National Football League. Mike Dempsey and Tony Smith here with you. It's YourJax Fantasy Football on CW17. Tony, in this market, we clearly know that Week 11 is underway. Jaguars get that victory. We may be looking a little worse for wear on this weekend's edition as we're filming this one with not a whole lot of sleep, but we will gladly trade our rest, Tony, for another victory for the Jacksonville Jaguars, 19-13. But from a fantasy perspective, not the greatest game all the way around, but Allen Robinson certainly delivered for you. Beyond that, not a whole lot happening for the Jags. Julius Thomas had an okay game. Blake Bortles really not the kind of fantasy performance that you'd like to have in your starting lineup, but you know what? I don't think many Jag fans really care about that at this moment.
No, I think Blake Bortles is going to be fine going forward, too. And it's nice as a Jaguars fan and as a fantasy owner to see the Jags specifically focus on getting Julius Thomas involved in a game plan early and often, and that he was targeted in the red zone when they've had so many problems. They finally start targeting Julius Thomas, and success for them last night in that game, even if it was on one play. So you hope that that portends for things for this team in the future, especially for Julius Thomas and Allen Robinson. He is just a freak of nature, and his leaping ability along with his size just give him an opportunity. And I know Blake tries to force the ball downfield a lot, but with a guy like that, anytime you see him one-on-one, I'd be fine with that being where you're going to take that risk, Mike.
That's what elite receivers are supposed to do. Supposed to be able to win 50-50 battles. We'll see if he ends up being an elite receiver, but he's putting up elite numbers for your fantasy team this year. People saying, hey, what's wrong with Allen Hurns? Nothing's wrong with Allen Hurns. Allen Hurns, maybe, I don't know, maybe Allen Robinson heard me deem Hurns the MVP of the team going into that game through the first 9 games of the season. I think he had been, Tony, but heck, he had his touchdown streak snapped. He's going to have many more productive games in the future, and both of those guys are going to make you very happy as fantasy owners. And like you said, Blake Bortles, as long as he has those weapons and they're all healthy together for the same time, he's going to have many better performances than he did on Thursday night. The most important thing for the Jags, come away with the win, but it's nice if you can get a win for your fantasy team in the process. Marcus Mariota, Tony, our first look at him up close. We'll be seeing him for a long time. Not really nobody to throw to other than Delaney Walker. Delaney had a terrific game, and if you had him in your fantasy lineup, you were very happy. But I think a bright future for Marcus Mariota.
Look, it looks like a bright future in this division at the quarterback position. With what you've seen from Blake, I thought Marcus Mariota was pretty impressive, especially with the limited amount of weapons he had in that offense going into that game, and a Jaguars defense that takes away the run. So that you're not able to run the ball effectively. You got no weapons at wide receiver. It really limits what you can do. But Mariota looked like the guy I expected him to be coming out of college. He's an accurate passer underneath, doesn't get the ball downfield enough, but they don't have anybody that gets downfield very much right now. And he's an athletic guy. He makes plays with his feet, keeps them in drives, keeps them in games. That's what you've seen from him and the Titans to this point this year. Thankfully, last night, not enough to get them over the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, Dorial Green-Beckham, by the way, is an impressive physical specimen, not an impressive football player at this point in time. He didn't have his conditioning, I thought, with him. I think the humidity got to him. He looked slow. He didn't look impressive at all. Out of that backfield, if you're looking for some running back help, it looks like Antonio Andrews by default at this point in time. Bishop Sankey was a healthy scratch for the Titans. And Dexter McCluster, who's a sneaky PPR kind of play. Boy, he took a shot to the thigh by Jonathan Cyprien, ended up hurting his left knee. He iced it, left the game, wasn't able to return. So monitor his status if you're in a deeper league and you have him as a PPR option. Tony, speaking of injuries, though, let's get to the Coastal Orthopedic Spotlight. The Injury Spotlight brought to you by Coastal Orthopedic Associates, restoring mobility and strength to life. Let's start in Chicago. It's been that kind of season. It feels like it's Alshon Jeffrey's segment here every single week. But Alshon and Matt Forte both missing practice late in the week this week for the Chicago Bears. Jeremy Langford owners are hoping Forte takes all the time he wants. Langford has been so impressive, but boy, do you dare play Alshon Jeffrey this week if he is active?
I think that you have to consider it with how good he's been when he's been on the field this year for the Bears. And look, we talk about Jay Cutler every week and him just locking into a guy. And Jeffrey is the guy that more often than not is going to be the one that he locks into. So with Cutler as hot as he is, and if he's going to lock in on one guy, it's probably going to be Jeffrey. If he's playing, yes, he's going to be in my lineup. I thought that Matt Forte's comments about, maybe I'm going to be here next week or not, they're always looking for the next best thing in regard to Langford. It's pretty funny, actually, at this point in the year, because Langford has clearly been good enough that he deserves a role in the Bears offense, even when Forte is 100% healthy.
I agree with you. The only thing that scares me about Jeffrey is a matchup with Aqib Talib with the Denver secondary. He was suspended last week back. He's one of the few real shutdown corners in the National Football League. So, just adjust your expectations accordingly. Then the Seattle-Arizona game, they played last week, but Seattle and Arizona, a couple of interesting situations here with Seattle. Marshawn Lynch not practicing most of the week. That's a late kick on Sunday, so be careful. Lynch is the kind of guy we've seen when he's not feeling right going into a game. He'll even miss a quarter to start the game at times. He's had issues with his back. This is an abdomen issue. Most people expect him to play, but I'd like to have an alternative, maybe Thomas Rawls on my roster.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know what to expect from Marshawn Lynch at this point. He hasn't given you a whole lot to this point this year. He's been kind of up and down. You don't know whether he's going to be the guy, even if he's active. They've had a tendency, maybe he's not going to play the first quarter this week. It's hard to figure out what Seattle's doing with Marshawn Lynch at this point. So I would be looking for other options. I'm not saying that you're going to have a bunch of guys that are better options than Marshawn Lynch, but there certainly are going to be a handful for you to choose from.
Finally, John Brown with his hamstring injuries, we mentioned Arizona, got back to practice this week, but he's been a guy who's been a healthy guy, or at least an active guy, and not produced for you on 2 occasions this year. Be very careful before inserting him in your lineup. And Michael Floyd's been missing a lot of practice this week with hamstring issues as well. Could be a big week for Larry Fitzgerald. And Carson Palmer wants to throw some touchdowns against his old team, the Cincinnati Bengals, this week. That's the Coastal Orthopedic Injury Spotlight, brought to you by Coastal Orthopedic Associates. Coming up next, we'll take a look at some of the matchups around the National Football League on Sunday and Monday, and which players you can exploit. A little bit later on, it's the weekend of the backup quarterbacks. How are these guys going to fare, and how are they going to impact the fantasy fortunes of their pass-catching teammates? Most importantly, we'll do all that and answer your tweets a little bit later on the show as well. With Tony Smith, I'm Mike Dempsey. It's YourJax Fantasy Football on CW17.
Here's a look at my top 5 running backs for this week, presented by Auction Direct USA.